Yes, of course there is a division, even among Samis, and if you compare with the Swedes, maybe it's less, but that's another story. But of course there is a part of that is the legislation. We can see it differs, it's one situation in Norway, one in Sweden, and a third in Finland. So the Swedish one is quite complicated because it's related mainly to reindeer herding. In Norway, we have reindeer herding, we have a reindeer herding legislation, but also the history of the Norwegian Samis in relation to the Norwegian state is differs. So it is, of course, you can compare, but there's certain challenges on the Swedish side. And when you talk about urbanization, of course, today a large number of Samis and Sami descendants are living in the urban areas. There are quite many here in Uppsala, in Stockholm, and so on. And many of these people are now coming back. So there is now, I think, quite a strong group, and it's going to become even stronger. That those so-called urban Samis, maybe you are a part of that new generation of urban Samis who have a different type. They pronounce their views and aspirations in a different way, maybe than indigenous Samis in the rural areas. So there is, I think, the urban Samis are quite an important group, and probably are going to diverse the discussion among Samis.
Yes, definitely. And I think that we are all needed in different places. That I have my place. I really feel that I have my place, and that I have a duty, as well as the people that live in the small villages. They do it in their way, and it's a lot of things that need to be fixed there. So, yes. But the first question was, you asked.
About the division.
Yes.
Identifying the issues that everyone's going to be considering.
Yeah, I think that is a very interesting question. And you can find like the bad guy is the same bad guy in all of these questions. It is difficult for a lot of different groups among Samis to collaborate. And that is also very much a result of the history. For example, in Sweden, I have a lot of friends in Arjeplog, around that area, Vilhelmina, which is the south part of Sápmi. They force moved Samis here in Sweden. They just kicked them out their home and their land and force moved them down to the south of Sápmi. And this was northern Samis, the force moved. So they had to, they didn't like spend the land. It was the same amount of land, but just twice as many Samis with twice as many reindeers. And they just forced a war on them. Like, now you can solve this yourselves. And some people even made agreements, like, we will get your family in, and then I will protect you. So I will keep this family out, we will get you into the Sami village, and I will protect you then. So just do what I say. So this is what they did, like, and this is out in the open. This is not a secret. We all know about it, and you can still very much see the effects of it. We have so many families that still try to get into the Sami villages because, I mean, the generation that got kicked out, they are still alive, so they remember this. Now you don't force move by law Samis. Of course, you do it in one way or another. But when I worked as an actress before at the Sami theater, and I remember going to play in Vilhelmina, and one of my co-workers, she was scared to go up on stage because she knew there would be families there that did not like her family, because they've been fighting since she was a kid. I mean, they've been fighting for 40 years. And so my generation, we are still brought up with being enemies with some of the other families, and this is not something that we created ourselves. So a lot of these issues that Sami have among us are also forced on us, because Sweden they made a law system, they did things against Samis, and then they left the Samis to solve them themselves. And still now today they will take no responsibility to get this problem a bit smaller would be to actually expand the land, maybe, So all of these families that got kicked out could get in again, and the reindeers, you didn't have to slaughter any reindeers. So everyone could actually live in these villages that the Swedish government once took. But they won't. So, of course, I mean, it's hard to solve a problem that you didn't create yourself and still try to fight a government that would work against you as a people, and then you have to fight in that group as well. And that is probably one of the most dangerous things, actually, and it's a very, very hard thing to figure out how to do or what to do with it. So it definitely created some kind of two different camps, reindeer herders and non-reindeer herders. But that is not the Sami population, the Sami people's fault. That is when you leave people in the dirt. That's what happens.
And I have to point out, and that was the aim of the legislation. And there have been a discussion to change that, to open up the villages for other members. But the former government, Mr. Reinfeldt's government, they didn't accept that. They said, okay, you can open up the villages for new members, but with no rights to hunt and fish. So it is a question about resources again. And now the question is still open. We don't know what the present government will do, and the issue is on the table. So it is, again, a discussion about resources.
Okay, I'll let more questions from Stoor come in here.
Thank you. My name is Maxida, and I'm at SLU with the Swedish Biodiversity Centre. I've been working with indigenous peoples in Africa mostly, and in North America to some extent, for about the last 30 years now. A few months ago, I was at a meeting in Japan where one of the events was a role-playing game, which involved the oil industry, forestry industry, an indigenous community, local government, and national government. And it was imitating a situation where, in theory at least, the law and the constitution supported indigenous people. But in fact, what happened, because of the demand for access to indigenous people's lands, for oil and timber in this particular case, the only people who were supporting the indigenous people were the NGO community. I actually had the role of playing the leader of the indigenous people. And it didn't matter what I did, what arguments I came up with, what I said was possible, what my rights were in terms of the Constitution, in terms of the law. Government and local government and industry got what they wanted. So what this tells me is that the biggest problem is power, a lack of power of indigenous people. So one of my questions to this whole group is, what can science and civil society and indigenous peoples do together to come up with ways of increasing the power of indigenous people? That's the one thing. Now, this conflict that's going on in Sweden with regard to the Sami people has been characterized as a civil war. I think civil war is putting it too politely. To me, it is a matter of genocide. Genocide by sneakiness, if you like. Genocide by a people who say one thing but really don't care. But I think we should make no bones about it. It's genocide. So there is a way to think about addressing this from a different perspective. And then I think the third thing, instead of talking about, well, would it be a good idea to have a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, the obvious answer is yes. But much more importantly, what does a successful outcome of such a commission look like? What do you really want? How are you going to go for it? How can you not only use the law that you have, but also improve the law, use the power of civil society to get the kinds of changes that you need? Thank you.
Yes, I agree with your observation, and we can also see now that, of course, the nation states are stakeholders, but a new group that is getting more and more stronger and stronger, that's the companies. And even if there is a discussion, I have been in a long time discussion with the World Bank to have new guidelines respecting, ethic guidelines respecting indigenous peoples, and it has the situation improved, but now it seems to be a backlash again, because the the World Bank is now, of course, diluting their earlier positions. But then you can also see other, there is also discussion in UN about human rights and businesses, and there is a process going on, but it's still quite slow, and there's a big resistance from governments, but also from the big companies, multinational companies. Even if there are guidelines, they are still, in the end, it could end up in real trouble. So, and the problem is also that the indigenous people, if we want to encounter these challenges, we are trying to do that. But our own allies are of course the NGOs and the scientific community, and that's so far has been quite a effective friends in combating this and helping us in our efforts. But I think it is a big challenge, and we have to fight on.
Okay. Just some reflections here, especially from my perspective then, to address the issue of what can science do. Politicians, and especially the Sami, have things they have to do themselves, and Sami scientists have things they have to do themselves. But for those of us who maybe aren't Sami or involved in disciplines like anthropology and in many different ways, what can we do? And one thing I think is important, and the only thing I think is effective, is if we present arguments and analysis and history as well, which demonstrates things, argues clearly about things, and presents the opponent's views accurately, so accurately that they will agree with, yes, this is an adequate representation of what I think, so as to bring factual, good evidence to the table. Because if we don't, as scientists, the first thing that's going to happen is exactly what did happen, where they said, oh, you're all just biased, so we're just going to throw you all out. They just said that, amazingly enough, about people doing social science and science. They just said, oh, you're all biased, so we're just not going to listen to you. You have to make it I think we have to produce material that by its argumentation supports Sami, not one that is arguing just from a politicized activism is great. We can supply activists, but if we become branded ourselves as biased activists, they will just throw us out. So and it can be a tricky balance act here, because when you start doing it, you find you get incredibly much involved when you see all kinds of injustices going on. But you have to try to keep up the arguments and present their counter arguments and overwhelm them with good arguments, and expose their bad arguments. And some of the things you definitely have to expose today, I think, is what I call ecolonialism. Instead of colonialism, it's ecolonialism. Or some people don't like that, so they say eco-colonialism, but I like ecolonialism. Anyway, you get the idea. Which is that ecological arguments, things like, oh, what we have to do to protect the environment, what we have to do to combat climate change, is all going to demand all of the sacrifice about all of us, but especially upon indigenous people. We cannot afford, they say, to have indigenous people, as commonly said, ruling half one half or 1/5 of the Swedish land mass. And we all must pull together now and so they pit environmentalists against Sami culture. Why did this reindeer herder, who was trying to protect his animals, his livelihood, his way of life, go to jail for 2.5 years? because he was trying to protect it against the wolf attack. But that's illegal. In Sweden, you can't, in Sweden, you have to stand by and watch the wolf eat your reindeer. You're not allowed to really do anything about it because the wolf is an endangered species, defined by science as an endangered species, as defined as the Scandinavian wolf, whereas the wolf as a species is not at all endangered. You get paid for shooting wolves in Russia. As a matter of fact, they've concluded that the only way to save the Swedish Scandinavian wolf is to import Russian wolves because they're too inbred in Sweden. So we need that Russian sperm in there to help to save the Swedish wolf. How is it still the Swedish wolf then? It's all a matter of definition. I was jokingly saying because they vowed at the same time they vowed this, we will never sneak so low as that we will actually, let wolves out of parks from captivity to just let them escape on the side to help. And we will never import wolves from Russia, though we very much like them to cross the border and impregnate the Swedish wolves. So I made this joke at a conference, as I said, since you vowed not to take in wolves, you still say you need the Russian wolves, why don't you just go out and get Russian wolf sperm and implant it? And the topic was managing nature, which is kind of managing the wilderness, because the wolf was going to be protected as a wilderness species. It's an oxymoron, managing the wilderness. But anyway, this was laughed out of everyone. They all laughed. It only took about 5 years later in this Russian wolf that crossed the border and was immediately shot, not to death, but with a little tag, with a GPS sender implanted in him, and so that they could follow him by helicopter. And it cost the Swedish taxpayer millions because they had to report about where this wolf was so that the reindeer herders were able to take their animals away. And this wolf got incredibly expensive. And then after this wolf suddenly just disappeared. And the environmentalists will say the Sami sneaked up and shot him. But the Sami say, the government finally couldn't take the bill any longer, and went off and hired some park agent to go and snuff him out because we just couldn't manage it anymore. But anyway, after that, the discussion about importing Russian wolf sperm became very real, and you could read it in the press. It was not just a laughing matter anymore, and it's probably going to be happening if it hasn't already. I don't know. But anyway, this is just an example of environmentalism put against indigenous issues, and how you cloak what is scientific with other ulterior motives or misunderstanding or leading to a certain political end, which is absolutely crazy. The Sami are attacked for having their reindeer over. You go in, you dam up the land, you mine the land, you destroy it, you build cities on it, and then you claim that their reindeer are overgrazing their grazing ranges because there's almost nothing left to graze. Comparatively, compared to what they used to have, we have to think very carefully about what is really going on. Look behind the rhetoric, and that is something that science can help us do. When the Swedish state pays, when a wolf attacks a reindeer herd, and the government makes a big deal about saying, oh, we're compensating the reindeer herders for their losses. Are they compensating reindeer herding, or are they compensating wolf herding. Because when they say they're compensating reindeer herding, they give up a big, it's costing billions. It's like waving a red flag in front of the normal Swedish voter. They say, oh, the Sami are just costing, look how much they're costing. They're just a tiny little hobby business which is costing us all of members of society, this huge amount of money. It's the law which says that the Sami can't protect themselves against the wolves, which is making this happen. So when they're buying, in effect, they're buying reindeer meat and paying for wolf herding, I call it, just to make the point, but they're saying they're subsidizing reindeer herding, which is not what they're doing. These are political issues of rhetoric we have to be very careful about, and science can help expose it.
I think just to make a little comment, and also on what you said before, I do think that you should look at this as definitely something much more aggressive than how people like to express it. And that's why I created this rebel group, to educate people that the politicians know about this. This is not a matter of educating the politicians. They know about this. The education has to be among the small people, the people beneath, the kids. Like, I had workshops with kids, and people go like, wow, you play at Idrottsgalan and Globen, and then you go have a workshop with 20 kids in Röros. Yeah, I do, because like in 15 years, they are grown-ups. So education, and to know that the politicians know this, they just don't give a shit. So how to make things like this, how to make a difference, is also to invite how the non-Samis or the people in Stockholm, Göteborg, how will you in the end get affected as well? And that's the truth. Like, I cannot tell you about mine or you, but you know what I mean, about my problem, my issues, because I know how this works. It's like if you lost someone. You lost someone close to you, and everyone is comforting you the first 2 days, and then they go home because they have their own life and they have to move on. When I sit here and I can grieve for like a year. So that's how you need to look at it as well. So that's why I try to tell people, like, this mining industry, you think this is only in Sápmi, and you don't like immigrants? Well, guess what's going to happen? Like in 50 years, you know how many people that will have to move from the northern part of Sweden down to the middle part of Sweden to the south part of Sweden? Maybe with reindeers if you're unlucky. You know how many people there will be? Like, this is such a huge amount of land that you destroy. And water, we might lose the water. We don't know that. So to tell people that you will get affected in the end as well. So don't you point your finger at me.